Hello, and welcome to our Unit 702 leading video on leading and developing people to optimize performance. This will just be a short 10 to 15-minute video, just give you some pointers on how to get started on the assignment. I will now hand over to James, one of our IMPD tutors.
Hello, thanks, Charlotte. So this one is, like many of the units on our syllabus, a combination of assessing the main factors that drive performance and making those initial definitions and looking at some basic modeling, and then applying that in the second half of the assignment where you can actually put that into your own organizational context. So as we go through the quick questions here today, I'd like you to be thinking of our three golden rules of how we approach the questions. I'll try and apply that and illustrate that throughout. And those are to make any definitions. There are quite a few of these on this assignment, especially in the early part of the work. To meet the command verb, always really important because that's the main thing that the assessors will be marking your work on. And finally, to use less is more. That is just enough arguments, models, theories, examples to illustrate the question, no more, no less, as we go through. And again, I'll try and reference those principles as we go through the guidance here today on Unit 702. So the idea here is we're going to try and consider ways we can optimize performance through leadership and development of people. We're also going to consider the kind of way the organizational structure itself can impact on performance. And let's get straight into this one without further ado. So first learning outcome, we're going to understand the principles for leading and developing people. First question, discuss, that's our command verb, the influence of leadership, culture, and people development on performance. And so there's quite a bit going on here with regard to the golden rules. The first thing that strikes me is we've got the word leadership, culture, people development, and we've got performance in there, all of which could benefit from you defining your view on what you think those terms mean, especially performance. This is an assignment based on performance, and so it would make sense for you to lay your stall out very early. What do you think the components of performance are? How do you recognize performance in an organization? For example, how does sustainability meet your definition of performance, or is it just a tactical get a goal hit kind of definition? It's not necessarily right or wrong, but it's useful for you to define what you think these terms really mean. You could talk about reputational performance here, for example, as well. There's lots of different elements of the word performance you could bring in and potentially define here. Culture, there's plenty of models around culture, leadership the same. And people development, again, just, well, what options, what do we mean by developing people? What does that look like in practice? So the command verb here, once we've got some good definitions in, is to discuss. This is to present an argument for and against this influence, how you think they do, how you think they don't do. Maybe you could talk around some of the conditions which need to be present in order for leadership, culture, people development here to have an influence on performance. So it's a nice discussion to open us out with, exploring some of the key themes on the things that can influence performance in the organizational context. Again, bring in some lived experience here, if you will. But these are now going to be broad kind of terms, broad ideas of the general things that you think can impact on that performance thing. So that's 1.1. 1.2, then I'm going to move on to appraise the impact of organizational development and design on performance. So we're going to hone in now on the organizational development idea and how it's designed. So you could talk around, departmentalization, the structure, tall versus flat, hierarchical, whatever. You could also talk around here around the kind of things in the organization, the structure such as vision and values, the kind of, high level stuff that might help to have an impact or not on performance as well. And here is an appraisal is our command verb. So the idea is you're going to, pick apart those different elements in some detail, and at some point give some kind of view on where you think they do, where you think they don't, and bring a bit of critical thinking in here at level 7. It's a level 7 assignment, so we're always looking at you to try to contradict and contrast the different views as we go through. 1.3, we're now going to move on for general leadership culture and people development and away from organizational development design, now into HR policy and strategy. So these are the tools that we can use in HR particularly that can, again, influence or inform here the way people are led and developed. So aspects here you could mention might include things like performance regime in terms of appraisals, what happens when people are not being notified or managed for poor performance, and how do we define poor performance anyway where an organization is? Like, what's the barrier? How do we know? You might think around some other approaches here we could take in terms of not just kind of legalistic stuff, but the policy-based stuff around you could talk around coaching and mentoring potentially here, training, the kind of things that HR does to support the way people are developed. You could talk around the way that we try to, through policy, make sure that organizations are nice and diverse, have the ability to critically think and bring different perspectives onto problems. We know from the research that a cognitively diverse group tends to solve problems better than a non-cognitively diverse group does. And so what do we do in organizations to try to tap into that research? Do we? And that's where you're going to bring some, again, critical appraisal into your answer here. How do things work? How do things not work? What conditionality needs to be in place for things to work? Just a nice logical approach to the response here. And to finish this learning outcome off 1.4, explore this time strategies to promote engagement, mental health and well-being as an enabler of performance. So you asked here to draw the link between engagement, mental health and well-being and performance in the way that you've defined it. Now, what we're going to do here is, again, look at some potentially definitions around what mental health and well-being looks like, what engagement looks like in the workplace, perhaps here. Your command verb is explore strategy, explore strategies here. So we're going to select a number of different strategies, approaches, whatever you want to call it. More than one, probably less than 5, I would suggest, but choose a number and make sure they're nice and specific to promote engagement, mental health, and well-being in your answer, and explore them. So how do they work? What needs to be the case to make them effective? How do they particularly promote these things as a link to performance? This is the key thing in this question. I sometimes talk about kind of the cart and the horse. You've got to kind of make a linkage between one concept and another, but one leads. Here, we're looking at how these strategies or approaches link into performance. We've got to make that very explicit and clear in your response. Okay, so that's the first learning outcome here. I don't think we've got any particular referral data on this one, Charlotte, have we? That's any use?
No, so it's quite a general referral. I think the main points people are getting referred on are just kind of the command verbs. So just make sure to keep an eye on that when you're writing your answers.
Great. Yeah, and again, we recommend that if you haven't already, print out the list of command verb definitions that you've been provided with, and then just keep on cross-referencing. Have you answered your question in the way that the command verb's asking you to? That's the most common reason people get referred. Okay, there's plenty of indicative content on the syllabus here. You don't have to reference everything. You don't even have to reference the things that it asks you to do, but just make sure any referencing you do use is pertinent and relevant to the question in the way that you'd like to answer it. But it's there to help you. So the second learning outcome is we're now going to go into the execution stage, the sharp end. We're going to propose a leadership and development strategy which values people whilst optimizing organizational success. So again, this is a link to performance again, isn't it? So here, I think the useful thing to do is to pick the question apart a little bit. So we're going to look at leadership approach. We're going to look at development strategies that help with this. And those approaches that you propose must meet the condition then of valuing people. So what does that look like and how do we know? And how do we, again, know that it's going to help with organizational success? And again, that kind of comes back to your initial definition of performance, and you're going to bring that in here. So the strategy or the approaches you're going to propose here, ideally, with all the work you've done so far, meet the needs of optimizing organizational success or, improving performance ultimately. So it's necessary for this question to meet all the different elements that have been asked. Just a couple of points there. Valuing people, you might want to particularly talk around recognition, reward, promotion, the support we actually give to people to fulfill whatever potential they have. You could also talk around how we mentor, coach, train people, how we promote learning. Again, that can feed into some of your work on engagement and well-being, so providing environments where people can disagree professionally without the fear of being chased out of town with angry mobs. And what do we need to have in an organization which makes us perform well together and maybe sustainably could be another thing that you bring into your answer here. But 2.1 is a real strategy. It's got to comprise leadership and development, and it's got to meet the needs of valuing people at the same time as optimizing success. So it's often that balance, isn't it, between what we think or what the shareholders want organization to do and what population is capable and willing to do right now, and how we kind of reconcile those two things and meet the tensions in the middle somewhere. But it should be applied to your own, ideally your own context, your own workplace. It should be something you could, in theory, implement. Okay. But it's just for this one, I think, like I said, just to reiterate, just to make sure you tease all the different components of the question apart and make sure each of them is addressed in your proposal in answer to this question. It's only one question for the second learning outcome here. So I think the expectation you can infer on that is that it's going to be quite a big, meaty, and meaningful answer in response. And that is pretty much everything for this assignment, I think, as a whistle-stop tour.
Yes, that's great. Thanks so much, James. And we are looking forward to receiving everyone's assignments. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thanks so much.